Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. So, oh, this year is different. So last year they had like spotlights over there and you couldn't look up. So I had a good excuse to stay on my screens all the time. So, but this year I have to look into the eyes. So what do I want to do today? I want to talk about how to integrate manual and automated test cases in once with a workflow engine. And who am I to talk about this? My name is Markus Stahl. I'm a test automation architect at Avata Systems. And we work in an international QA department around the globe. So if you are into Robot Framework and live close our offices in Germany, Malaysia, Romania, or Latvia, then check our job page. And I'm yes, so I'm done. This was my part. Anyways, I do a lot of open source stuff, and when I do open source stuff, I do a lot with the workflow engine Camunda. I always talk about Camunda. I'm not paid by them. I just like their open source products, and the only thing I get is swag. So that's why everyone does the open source, you know. And I do this so often that when I joined here, the workshops on Tuesday, they called me the Camunda guy. So here the Camunda guy comes in, which is quite funny because when I go to the Camunda Con and they all know I always talk about Robot Framework, they call me the robot guy. So actually they call me Mr. RPA, so that's always a good entrance to explain to them what actually a Robot Framework is, that it's not just RPA. But you all know Robot Framework, so today I'm going to talk a bit about workflow engines in general and Camunda in particular. And every year I start with a small bubble slide, so you all get on the same side how a workflow engine works. Depending which engine you use, doesn't matter. You always probably start with a process model like this. That's BPMN, Business Process Modeling Notation. That's not something invented by Camunda. That's an international standard to describe a process. And it would look something like this. You start a process, then it stops at a task here at generate test data, and then it waits for a client to pick up the workload, processes, give it back to the workflow engine, and then the workflow engine forwards it further down the line. So it would look in this example like this. For example, the robot test case or task would pick up this workload, processes it, then it's forwarded to the next one. Then the next task would pick it up and send it to a third-party API. And then the next one would validate the result, and then the process is finished. And you cannot do this, of course, with only one test case or one process flow, but like in this example, with 100 flows at the same time. And usually if you do something in UI, that's quite slow, so there the workloads pile up, but they are processed all independently. So, okay, that's my usual starter with the bubble slides. But why now workflow engine, and why not just use plain robot framework? Now, let's have a look at this example again. You always, if you want to automate this one, you would say, why do you need a workflow engine for this? I can also do this in robot framework. Yes, you're right, that's really straightforward. It would be something like this. You would make 3 keywords out of this process, say generate test data, send test data to the API, and then validate the result. Now, you already see that there's like a small gap in the process flow. That's why, because this is inspired by a real example in one of my projects, and this is of course not the complete process. So I have the requirement that from time to time the test data isn't provided. So sometimes I start the test case with certain test data, sometimes it needs to generate by its own. So now I have to be a little bit flexible. In BPMN, that's no problem. I use these XOR gateways. So if no data is provided, then please generate some, and if it's available, then just skip the data generation. That we can also do in Robot Framework. Very nice. If no test data is available, we generate it. But this already looks a little bit ugly, so we abstract this test case and say generate test data if not available. So this already feels a little bit uneasy. So have like this uncertainty in a test case. But nevertheless, we could save just bringing a workflow engine, another tool on board. However, now the difficult part comes. So it could happen that you work in a business where, even though you are in testing, you are in an environment where all the systems that are necessary for your test environment are not under your control. This could happen if you are working in the financial business, so that is regulated, so not only one company could control the complete market, but also in my case, that's the energy business. So in my case, I have third-party test systems. My test systems depend upon, but the other third-party systems, they have their own life cycles. They have their own goals. I mean, they only work all together, but they have their own life cycle. So it could happen, they tell me, that the third party in application could be offline for up to 50 minutes because they make a deployment or something. And how to use this, how to integrate this uncertainty into my test case. Now, you could do it like this, like try a couple of times and up to, but how often? 3 times, 5 each time, and wait for 5 minutes in between, or more often. And what if this system would be available after 60 minutes? You wouldn't succeed in this case. And of course, this looks ugly as well. So now you have a more complicated test case. That's not nice to read. So we would do it like this. So try a couple of times to validate the result. That's not pretty, but still we made it. So technically that does work. And now they say, but now you want to have this case tackled that maybe it would be available after 60 minutes. So that means you really have you cancel just 1 minute too short. Then in Camunda you have the opportunity to say, okay, if something times out, then a person can have a look at it. So in this case, after 50 minutes, the workload would be published to a person, me, and I could like have a look into the test case itself, see why is it hanging, and then, for example, call the other team or the other company and ask, what's happening? What's up with your test systems? Is it on our side? Is it on your side? Where's the problem? And if they say, oh, just I don't know, we are really busy. We had some struggle with the deployment. Try again in 5 minutes. I say, okay, retry in 5 minutes. That's okay. But now imagine, sometimes I go on vacation, and then after 2 weeks I come back, and I have like piling up test cases, old ones. In which one should I look to? And the company says, oh, don't worry. After 7 days, we purge our queues, so we don't process the requests anymore. So then I have to identify which test cases are too old to investigate. But I can do the same trick as I did before with the 15 minutes here. So if I don't make it in 7 days to have a look at the test case, just abort it, because they will have purged the queues, the data will be gone. That's no problem. Now, we wouldn't be able to do this in Robot Framework somehow. So how would you integrate this in so this case here? We wouldn't be able to do this in Robot Framework. You would have to create a web UI and so on and so forth, and how to integrate this here. And here you really get a web UI, and where you can have a look at the data that is in the test case and take action on this. Now I have another requirement in my project. Everything is manual, so all the test cases are manual, and they're really, really complex. And this test case here, so that's inspired by the real test case scenario, it's in the middle of a long test case process. So usually my manual testers, they take like half an hour just to create the test data. And along the way is this test process. It's a test in itself, but it also creates the test data that is necessary for manual test cases that execute afterwards. So it's a test case on the one side, but it's also a test data generation on the other side. So they have to start the test case with certain values they just invent or they need, and they cannot always foresee these. So that's why I created for them an input form. So they have here a few example data sets they can use for entering their own stuff for their own test case. And when they click on this button, Run Test Execution, then this happens. They create a workload, a test case execution, and it goes through the flow. And afterwards, whenever that is, I know after 20 minutes, immediately, maybe tomorrow, they will have the test data set and can continue. And of course, they don't do it like once, but they can do it as often as they want. So they can prepare like 10, 20, as many test cases as they like. All right, so much the theory. How could you now implement this? So when I now talk about Camunda, Camunda is a company, as I said, but it's also products. They have currently 2 products. It's Camunda 8 and Camunda 7. I won't go into the details about the difference. If you want to try this, use Camunda 7. That's the complete open source experience. You can achieve everything with that. It's an awesome tool, and Camunda 8 is faster, but only if you have like millions of test executions, which I hope you don't have. I don't have it, so I'm good with the 7. So everything that a database can handle, you can do with Camunda 7. So how would you do this? In the last years, I was always talking about the Camunda library. That's an integration I implemented 2 or 3 years ago, and it basically wraps the Camunda 7 C7 REST API. And provides you keywords, so you can start a process. There's a keyword start process. There's a keyword fetch the workload from the workflow engine, and so on and so forth. But around the same time, ASCO had basically the same idea, but in my opinion, a better concept. So he invented Carrot RCC, which is also a C7 client connecting with the REST API, but it does all the Camunda handling outside of the robot framework task. You will see an example in a minute. And so his client does all the connection details, and he uses RPA framework and RCC from RoboCon in the backend. So he uses like a kind of standard. It's really well documented how it works. Everything is completely open source, and that's, in my opinion, more solid than a library just from one dude. I mean, I love it. I maintain my library. Don't worry if you use it, but it's if you are a manager, maybe you would have to choose between those 2. I would probably go with Carrot RCC. Now, what's the difference in implementation? You all engineers, you want to know, okay, how do I do this? So this is the Camunda library. And I was coming back then from the robot framework side, so in my mind, I needed keywords to do something. So I created a keyword to fetch a workload. But you already see here, it looks kind of weird because the robot framework task is not a service in itself, so I have to start it by job trigger or something, and then I don't know how long it runs, how many workloads it should process, so I just say try to process hundreds of workloads. In this example, greet 100 people. I think that wouldn't be enough even. I fetch the workload, and then I need to check, well, if the workload had any, because it could be I only fetch the variables down here, and then I don't know if I don't have any variables, if there was no workload available, or if there was workload without variables. So I have to check again if I get a response at all, and if not, then I just quit the execution. And only in line 12, I finally do hi, greet the person, and then tell Camunda that I'm done with my workload. That's a lot of stuff. You can do it shorter. So I was thinking how to make this more convenient and more service oriented. Then it could look like this. I have an outside small service that constantly checks if there are persons to be greeted. And if there's a person to be greeted, then execute the robot framework task once, and I can be sure that task will get a workload, and then fetch the workload, greet the person, and then complete the task again. That's much shorter, but still you need to learn the robot framework REST API, basically. You need to learn how it works, what means fetching, what means completing, how do you raise errors. So from an automation perspective, that puts another layer of complexity on top. Now, with ASCO's solution, that's very nice. It's much shorter because you don't need to learn Camunda. you have to learn basically only how the work items in RoboCop work. You have to use this magical keyword, set task variables from a work item, and then all the variables from the workflow are available. So ASCO's current RCC client fetches the workloads from Camunda. Then with the help of the robot YAML, it matches the robot framework task with the task in the process flow. Then you greet the person and push the result variable. Current RCC pushes the result variables back to the workflow engine. And you, as a test automation engineer, you don't know with which workflow engine you work. And the beauty of this is you can even exchange the workflow engine. So we did this in one Twitch stream. We used the other workflow engine, the new one, Camunda 8, and all ASCO had to do, it sounds very short, but I guess it was a little bit more work than just to implement another client. He implemented Parrot RCC, which is the same client, but just for the Camunda 8 workflow engine. And we just replaced the client, and the robot framework implementation could stay the same, because robot framework, the task, they don't know they are talking to Camunda. And maybe, well, but that's maybe a question later for you. I guess you could also just use the RoboCorp process flow itself, because it works with the RoboCorp API. So you could also say we switch from one workflow engine to another. You could even switch to a workflow engine from another provider. So that's a really, really nice and neat solution. So now I'm talking. You're probably already thinking about the afterbody. So, conclusion, it was too long, you didn't listen. So, in short, you get all these, if this example here looks really, really simple, but imagine you have a really complex workflow and you cannot automate all of it. So in my case, I have old legacy Adobe Flash applications and you don't want to automate those. But it's just one piece, one part in my test case. So I automate everything around that, but this one piece the person has to do, because otherwise I would spend more time automating that stuff and maintaining that stuff than the manual tester takes to, input some data that I give him into a Flash application. And you don't have any APIs available, of course. So you could have a really complex workflow, and you can automate all of this around, and just keep this one manual step in the middle that you do not automate, and just, yes, it's not automated end to end, but you're still much, much faster than if you do everything manually. So that's the basic use case here. And last Tuesday, Oscar was giving a workshop, and he made great material about if you want to start with this. He made like a complete self-study course out of it. So if you go to this website in the middle of that's that big QR code, the automation playground, you get tons of material, how to set things up, how to connect Camunda with RCC and so on. Everything in there is for Camunda 8, but don't worry. You can still use Camunda 7, but everywhere where the documentation says Parrot RCC, use Carrot RCC with a C instead, and you're good to go. It just works just great. So if you want to experiment with this, go to this QR code in the middle and give it a try. If you have any questions, we have a hashtag Camunda support channel in the Robot Framework Slack. So Asko and I are watching this all the time, and we're really happy if someone raises interest or sends us a question. Just for completion, there's also my GitHub repository, but tons of material is also again at Asko's GitHub repository. So that's some stuff you should definitely take home and give it a try, and then contact us on Slack or the forum. And this time I'm much faster. I'm really much faster. Thank you very much.